You're like me. You get so absorbed in what you're doing that you lose sight of everything else. I've always been told this by my father. Unfortunately, my father is no longer with us. He passed away from an illness 5 years ago, leaving me as the sole member of my family. I'm a 35-year-old company employee, working in the development department of an automotive parts manufacturer. My parents divorced when I was young. The reason was my mother's infidelity. She left only a divorce notice and disappeared suddenly. Afterwards, my father tried to find her and discuss things, but ultimately, my mother never returned home, and I was raised solely by my father. Since we were not wealthy, I started working immediately after graduating from high school. My first job was at a company where a friend of my father worked. That friend was Kevin. Now, he is the head of the development department. Kevin had been helping us even before I started working there. He used to take us out for meals when times were tough and would secretly give me some pocket money when my father wasn't looking. He helped a lot when my father passed away. I really owe a lot to Kevin. I might as well have been hired at this company for Kevin's connections. I wanted a job where I could think and create, so I worked hard and studied while working. My efforts paid off, and after 3 years, I was transferred to the development department. Since then, I've been enjoying fulfilling days working with Kevin. There were tough times after my father passed away, but thanks to Kevin, I'm still able to work normally. Kevin is a very important person to me. One day, during such a routine, something happened. A staff member was transferred to the development department. He was George, formerly from the sales department. He is the same age as me, but he's an elite employee who graduated from a prestigious university. He had built a considerable track record in sales. George was promoted to section chief in the development department. In other words, he was going to be my boss. That surprised me. I had thought George would continue to excel in the sales department. I never quite understood the decisions made by the higher-ups in the company. George and I hadn't talked much. We just greeted each other in passing. I found George a bit difficult to deal with. He seemed very confident in his educational background. I once overheard him talking and laughing in a demeaning way, saying, "I can't think of people without a university degree as humans." Since I only graduated from high school, I guess he looks down on me too. On his first day after the transfer, George greeted the employees in the development department, but he just briefly said "nice to meet you" to me without even making eye contact. Seeing George like that made me feel anxious about the future. Although he was an excellent employee in sales, he was practically a novice in development. Frankly, the projects George proposed were something anyone could think of, lacking any novelty. The other employees also frowned upon his proposals, thinking, well, that's really not going to work. But George seemed completely oblivious and always presented with full confidence in our department meetings. Well then, let me present this new project idea. I couldn't tell what Kevin was thinking, but he usually looked down whenever George presented something. 2 months after George joined, each employee in the development department was asked to submit and present their new product ideas in front of all staff members. Employees without any managerial position presented first. I explained my diligently thought-out plan, albeit nervously. After finishing my presentation, Kevin praised me, saying, "Quite an interesting proposal. It really shows your long experience in the development department. Work on it a bit more and present it again next week." I couldn't hide my joy at his words. When I glanced at George, he was turned away, muttering under his breath and looking unimpressed. Soon it was George's turn to present. "Then, I will make my proposal," George explained with full confidence, but again, his presentation lacked innovation. I muttered to myself, wondering which company would buy such a product. Kevin, addressing George as he continued his presentation, said, "Kevin, looking down, said, I'm afraid we can't accept this as it is. You need to add a bit more creativity." He then added, "Let's stop the explanation here for now. That's enough." Kevin cut him off, and George was left stunned. Then Kevin continued, "You may hold the position of section chief, but you're still a beginner here in development. It would be good for you to learn from skilled employees like David." I was surprised to hear my own name suddenly mentioned. George responded with a simple yes, but I could see frustration in his eyes. After that, George clearly started showing hostility towards me. After the presentation, he glared at me and said in passing when no one else was around, "An elite like me has nothing to learn from a high school grad like you." At one point, he even said, "Remember, I'm still your superior. Someone like you will never surpass me. Just be content with being a perpetual regular employee." He continued to belittle me. Worse still, George started using his position as a supervisor to take credit for my achievements. Determined not to lose to him, I threw myself into my work more than ever. Seeking perfection, I worked late every night, often missing the last train and staying at a hotel near the office. Not just at night. I arrived at the office earlier than anyone else and barely ate lunch, just nibbling on crackers while working at my computer. I worked so hard that it worried my colleagues. But no matter how hard I worked, my achievements were stolen. Still, I refused to give in, even though I felt frustrated. Perhaps George must have been getting frustrated with me for not breaking down easily. One day, George set me up. He fabricated a mistake and pinned it on me. It wasn't a minor error. It involved a major project with an important client. I was summoned by President Johnson and ended up receiving a harsh reprimand. President Johnson even said, "We'll consider disciplinary action." Unsatisfied with this, I confronted George. "What's your intention? Why did you change the responsible person's name to mine, making it look like I made the mistake?" I demanded. But George stubbornly responded, "Where's your proof of that?" Indeed, I had no proof. George had cleverly set me up without leaving any evidence. A few days later, I was told I was being transferred to a tiny branch in the countryside. I thought Kevin would somehow stop it. But Kevin said, "Maybe a change of environment will be good for you. I think the branch suits your current situation better." At that moment, I felt utterly hopeless. In other words, it seemed like they were implying that I lacked the necessary skills. It felt as though they were saying so. Helplessly, a month later, I headed to my new post. The company arranged my housing, but the branch was in a rural area. All I could see were fields and farmlands, with the nearest small supermarket a 20-minute drive away. Can I really make it in a place like this? I wondered, anxious about the future. But the staff at the branch were all nice people, and I quickly became comfortable with them. There was no overtime, and I could properly rest on weekends. The company's people often shared vegetables they grew at home with me, and I began to appreciate the charms of a slower-paced, homely atmosphere. Branch manager Henry was a gentle and kind person who highly appreciated my work. "He really saved us by coming here," they told me, expressing gratitude. After that, I also met someone special. It was Emily, who worked as an office staff member at the branch. She was 3 years younger than me, with a graceful appearance. Honestly, she was very much my type. We both enjoyed watching movies and became close after bonding over movie discussions during a welcome party. I wasn't sure about Emily's feelings, but day by day, I found myself increasingly drawn to her. Listening to her gentle way of speaking always soothed my heart. Life at the branch, unlike the tense atmosphere at the headquarters, flowed with gentle, kind moments. One day, something happened. I received a call from Kevin on my day off. Kevin asked, "Are you doing well?" but at that time, I still hadn't forgiven Kevin. Even though we used to talk casually outside of work, I replied indifferently, "I'm fine, just going about my business." Sensing my mood, he laughed and said, "Don't be so downhearted. I've heard about you. Henry has been praising you too." "Well, that's good. Sorry, I have some errands today," I responded, abruptly ending the call. I had been close with him ever since my father passed away, and suddenly he abandoned me. I couldn't believe he even had the nerve to call me. Even though Kevin occasionally called after that, I deliberately ignored his calls. Around 6 months after being transferred, something wonderful happened. I started a relationship. Of course, it was with Emily. After several meals together and on our third date, I mustered the courage to confess my feelings. Emily happily accepted, saying, "I've also come to like you, David." Our relationship quickly became known throughout the branch, and our colleagues were supportive. I was living a fulfilling life in both work and love. Then one day, Kevin visited the company. It had been just about a year since I was transferred. Upon seeing me, Kevin immediately said, "Oh, long time no see." He greeted me with a smile. By then, my anger had subsided, and I felt guilty for having cut off contact. "It's been a while. I'm sorry about before," I said, indirectly apologizing. Kevin replied, "It's okay. I would have felt the same in your position." It seemed Kevin had some business with Henry, as he excused himself saying, "I'll leave you for now." About an hour later, he came to my desk and said, "There's something I need to talk to you about." "I'm glad to see you're doing well," he began. "Yeah, well, I guess I'm doing fine. Enjoying my days here," I responded, returning to our casual tone. Kevin smiled, seemingly reassured by my response. Then, after a brief pause, he shared some significant news. Firstly, George had left the company. Since my transfer, George had been unable to produce results and had been reprimanded by President Johnson. Naturally, once I was gone and he couldn't claim my achievements as his own, his performance plummeted. George, unable to improve his performance and losing trust among his colleagues, was demoted and, unable to accept this, left the company in despair. Secondly, Kevin revealed the reason for my transfer. "It's not that you were demoted," he said. "Actually, I had high hopes for you." It turned out that Kevin had seen me working tirelessly, blinded by my surroundings due to George, and thought a change of environment was necessary. "Your father also used to get so absorbed that he couldn't see around him. You're really just like him," he said with a smile. Additionally, the branch was short-staffed and struggling with performance, so they needed an immediate contributor like me. And then, looking me in the eye, Kevin said, "Would you consider returning to the headquarters? I really want to recommend you for a section chief position. Honestly, we're in a bind without you," Kevin said. Yes, I was happy to hear his words, but at the same time, I thought of Emily. Sensing my hesitation, Kevin asked, "Is there something bothering you?" So, I honestly told him about Emily. Kevin responded, "I see. Well, discuss it with her and then decide." He suggested I get back to him later with my decision. That night, I quickly spoke with Emily about it, and she said with a beaming smile, "Congratulations," then continued, "So, what do you want to do, David?" "I want to go back to the headquarters and work as a section chief in the development department. That's what I really want. But I also want to stay with you, Emily." She smiled and said, "I understand. I'll follow you, David." I was overjoyed. Emily decided to leave the branch and move with me. I informed Kevin about our decision right away. He seemed pleased and said, "That's great." About 2 months later, I returned to the headquarters. All the employees warmly welcomed me back, saying, "Welcome back." Soon after, I was called by President Johnson and discussed my promotion. "I have high expectations for you," Yes, I'll continue to work hard, I replied. This is how I became the section chief of the development department. Kevin congratulated me. Congratulations, David. I'm happy for you. I think your dad would be proud. When I told Emily about the promotion, she also congratulated me. Congratulations, you've worked so hard. By the way, Emily and I had started living together in an apartment costing about $1,000 a month after moving here. Then, about 6 months later, I proposed to Emily. It was also the anniversary of when we started dating. Holding the ring, Emily said, "It's like a dream. Let's always be together." "I promise to make you happy," I said, looking into her eyes. I immediately reported our engagement to Kevin. "That's great. Make sure you make her happy," he said. "Yes, I want Kevin to attend our wedding in place of my father," I told him. He responded, "I was planning to do just that. I want to live a happy life with my beloved wife, never forgetting my gratitude to Kevin, who has always supported me."